Hello, everyone. This is Cameron Thompson of Home 2 Canine Dog Training and Hope 2 Canine Rescue, your host for Unleash Your Dog's Best, a virtual interview series and training event that we are so excited to bring back to you again this year. We have a really special person for me to visit with today, but before I talk to him, I'd like to take a moment to share a little bit about this event in case you're listening for the very first time. In this interview series, you will discover some of the secrets to understanding your dog, creating better behavior, and eliminating stress. Myself, along with a fantastic panel of experts, are sharing what it means to unlock the secrets to successful dog ownership, to eliminating bad behaviors, and stepping up into leadership, which ultimately empowers dog owners to find freedom and peace of mind in their life as a whole. Over and over again, this knowledge paves the way for dog owners to set better boundaries in their lives, to make calmer and more calculated decisions, and to just generally learn to slow down and listen more intently. Perhaps most importantly, we want to show you the importance of not getting stuck in past stories. I encourage you to listen to each call to get the most out of this event. Every interview will be unique and valuable thanks to the diverse panel of our experts. Every morning, we're going to be sending you an email with a link to the interviews of the day, so do keep an eye out for those throughout the summit. And a quick reminder, technology being what it is, sometimes those things are going to hit your spam or your junk folder, so please be sure to dig a little bit deeper if they're not popping into your inbox as easily as they should. All right, let's get going. Today, I am thrilled to introduce Gary Cassera to you today. Gary has been working over the past 11 years with dogs on a professional level, and he's learned to listen very closely to the often very different sides of the human and dog relationship. During this time, Gary says there is one thing he has come to know for sure. The humans tell the story, the dog tells the reality. You don't have to teach a dog to be a dog, but you do need to teach a human to think like a dog. That's where Gary is focusing his energy on multiple platforms these days, helping humans view everything from the perspective of the dog's side. Gary helps dogs and their owners every day through his website, thedogside.com, his daycare in Los Angeles, Canine Social Club, LA, his pack walking business in New Jersey, Balanced Dogs, and through his foundation, soulmutt.org. You can also find Gary regularly sharing on Instagram and YouTube, and he loves helping people who want the best for dogs. In a little bit, we'll talk about how you can get more connected with Gary, what he's up to on the day-to-day, how the nonprofit is developing. But first, I want to welcome him to the summit and get into some great conversations. So, Gary, thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this project and to chat with me today.
Thank you for putting it together. I'm sure it was a huge undertaking. So from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate you putting this out there for people.
Heck yeah. It's a pleasure to do it when I get to rub elbows with people like you who have a similar vision and mission and who are really living and loving what they do. I mean, it makes all those little goofy hiccups along the way totally worthwhile when we get to sit down and end up with the opportunity to bring people really life-changing information, because that's how it's worked out in the past, and I know we're going to be able to create that again in our new community of experts. So totally my pleasure, and couldn't do it if it wasn't the partnership of you sharing your unique point of view and experience and really rounding out my intention here for the audience. So I'd love to start really quickly just to have you share a little bit about who you are and your story personally that brought you to being someone who works as a professional with dogs and their owners, and what's kind of the driving force behind why this industry and why your passion to help dog owners developed beyond just, being exposed to dog training. So I'm going to give you the floor, and maybe you can just share, with our friends that are listening a little bit more about how you ended up where you are today and what is so important to you about the work that you're doing going forward.
Awesome. Well, I'd say in the last couple of years, I've really come to grips with what it means to be misunderstood. I was a very energetic, very creative kid who was always sharpening his pencil and moving around and was constantly being told, Gary, sit still. Gary, have a seat. And it just wasn't in me. Over probably the first 7 years of my career, I did what a lot of people do, and it's trying to put the dogs in the box by teaching them skills, by asking them to sit down and wait to go to the bathroom, and the same things I remember being in first grade and having those same feelings of saying, like, well, wait, that's not what I'm feeling right now. Actually, it would be better for me if I moved first, then did my math homework. So I got a Malinois, and then it really kind of made everything clear for me of what is expected, what is genetic, what is learned, and it set me on a path for the last few years of trying to really understand, as one of my mentors says, dogs have to be werewolves. They have to be half dogs and half humans. And we really have to understand that they're only capable of thinking like dogs. It doesn't matter how we rationalize the games we play and the things that we do, they only can think like dogs. And it's so important to understand where they come from and what motivates them.
Yeah, that is so true. I was not expecting that answer, and I absolutely love it. I think it's a really important insight for a lot of dog owners to gain from, our conversation here, that there is a very, common dynamic of trying to sort of put a square peg, i.e. the dog, into a round hole, a life of human beings that is chaotic and disorganized and inconsistent and, totally a foreign land, the way the vast majority of us live in terms of when we bring a dog into our lives and relationship is formed. So I think that's such a beautiful visual that you can give people that's very human relatable to when we've been, sort of put in this narrow lane and it just doesn't fit, and the experience of that and how frustrating it becomes. So many of our dogs, I think, are incredibly frustrated with what we're asking of them. So I love that. The first question that I had for you off of that is, that do you find with the work that you do with dog owners, and even in the rescue side, really, do you find that there is a particular ingredient outside of sharing that insight in your own story that needs to come into play in order to help owners become less intimidated by the shifts they need to make to improve their dog's behavior and to develop a healthier relationship and dynamic with them? What are the kind of most common things that come up for you that you find yourself sharing that help people to really, buy into and become less overwhelmed at the thought of how they will need to move forward in order to improve their situation?
So for me, the two things I see most, I'd say the first one is self-awareness. Most people, when I sit down with a client for the first time, one of the first questions I ask them is, why did you get this dog? And that's 50% of their problem. If they can figure out and be honest with me what they were trying to accomplish when they got this dog, that's how the relationship started, and we can move forward because the dog is still there. And, if you're sick and you get a dog, maybe your dog becomes protective because that's how he entered your life. That's what she thought her responsibility was to protect you. And that can mean lots of different things. I just had a client recently that the dog was fine and then all of a sudden started snapping at her. Well, why? Because that's his job. That's part of dogs, the way they discipline, is to tell you, I don't like that. So they did it like a dog, and for her it came off as, one story. But once we got to talk, she started to really understand how, not consciously, she wasn't a bad person. She just didn't understand the things that she was doing, how the dog was misinterpreting them. And it's, and how the dog misinterprets is case by case. That's, some dogs might decide to go forward more. Some dogs might decide to go backwards more. So what they choose is part of what I do at my daycare every day, is try to figure out what is learned here and what is genetic. How much of this has been taught and is part of their environment, and how much of this did nature actually put this in the dog's brain and said, you're going to like this, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 3, right? And then, we get involved because of, again, lack of self-awareness. We need love. We need different things. Then all of a sudden the dog takes that information and says, well, how do I take this in and acclimate it into my life? What does this mean to my reality? And the more we can understand why we got our dogs, we're really able to move forward. And it's, I put this in the freebie for you guys. It's not a simple answer. It's really, it can be, hey, I walk every day 5 miles, and it sounds like great to rescue a dog and walk with him. But if you're planning on walking and you get a dog and that's a consistent thing in your life that you don't follow through, now you're stuck with a partner that's unfulfilled. And now you have a relationship that has angst and stress and all the things that we get in human or dog relationships that aren't fulfilled. If my wife, if I do things wrong, she has feelings because she has her own needs. So if we can understand what's our dog's needs, what's my responsibility with that, because obviously we get the dogs for things that we want. We want love. We want, to pet them. And I mean, that's cool. But if we come at that part first, then we have to realize that's where the dog is stuck. And the second one for me really is love. There are so many people. So I'll meet, and I'm sure you meet people, that other professionals and owners all the time that say, I love dogs. And I always stop them before they go and I say, what does that mean to you? Because for me, most of the time I find, and I hate to generalize, but it's 11 years of paying attention, observe, remember, compare. And one of those things is it's usually something the dog is giving them. It's something, I love when she sits on the couch. I love these things. So love, love, love. But we don't understand how that's our version of it. What is it doing to them? So most dogs, love and affection is the problem, but it's so hard to realize that's the problem when we think, how could love be the problem? I'm loving my dog. I'm doing all these amazing things for them. How could they do that to me? How could they do me dirty like that? So really understanding what love, there's so many terms thrown around, so I'm kind of cautious to back off of certain terms because people might have a stereotype or a preconceived notion to that word. But what is love to your dog? One of my dogs would hate if you try to get him to come on the couch. That's not who he is. He doesn't want lovey, feely, touchy. That he's a working cattle dog, so he likes his own space. He likes to go under the table. So. When I call him over and I want that, what do I need at that moment? Because is it for him? Is it for me?
Being self-aware in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things one of my mentors said to me, and it was probably the thing that changed my life most. And I didn't think about bringing it up during the interview until right now, but he always said to me, when you touch your dog, you're sharing the two most powerful emotions you can possibly share with them. Either your weakness or your dominance. And I think most people get out of balance there. We touch our dogs because they did something 3 weeks ago. We touch our dogs because they made us feel calm when they didn't do something bad. But very rarely, when I watch dogs supervise or socialize with each other, are they doing things like that? They're mostly doing things more out of dominance. Can I smell your ear? And the dog says no. And he's like, oh, maybe you're higher than me. So then they do a play bow, and now the competition's on, right? So there's, just to keep that in balance, when you touch your dog, if you can be self-aware of what you're sharing at that moment, doesn't mean that you can't share affection, doesn't mean that, it just means if you're aware of it and the scale comes out to be 70-30, that would be a good place to just start to say, before I do anything, let me just work on the environment that I'm creating. And for me, most of the time when you change the environment, the behaviors disappear. So I don't work specifically on a symptom. If your dog is leash reactive, to me that's a symptom. That's a cough. You might actually have something going on with your lungs. So I always try to get to, I hope the word's right, the systemic issue, like what's really going on that's causing that problem.
Root cause.
And and for me, consistently, it's self-awareness and misappropriated love and affection.
Yeah, I think that's super, super spot on and really important for people to hear and understand. To me, I'd imagine that the follow-up question to that is, outside of course, things like this, which we're specifically endeavoring to create so that people will broaden their understanding and education, where do you tend to answer for what are the best ways in which a dog owner, dog trainers, of a lot of dog trainers listening, can go to increase their understanding of these principles and dynamics to improve their self-awareness and become more conscious and connected to what are those motivators and what is the impact that it's having on their specific dog or pack of dogs, as it were, in their home. Because I find that, a lot of dog owners are sort of stumped, right? There's a lot of information out there within the industry that can be very confusing, very overwhelming. There's a temptation, I think, in all behavior for us to take a shortcut and find an easy, fast way to get the result that we're looking for. And this isn't really something that you can necessarily accomplish that in, right? Understanding yourself and becoming more connected and conscious and really looking at causation and root issues is like, it's a deeper work typically. It requires a healthier process and commitment to a bigger picture, long game dynamic in a lot of cases. So I'd love to sort of hear what you recommend and how you coach and counsel people to understanding what's going to be involved in getting them clear on this stuff, or clearer and improving their understanding and connection with it. Does that question make sense? I hope. I mean, I think what I'm leaning towards is we want them to understand that there may be, multiple ways to go about getting it, but also that at the core is this process concept, right? And how they go about doing that so that they can achieve success, whether it be, immediate assistance and or that long game scenario.
So for me, what most people want from me is the do part. And for me, that's the least interesting. If I was to show you a video and you're like, whoa, how's Gary going to get that dog to walk on a leash? And then I show you the after video, right? And you're like, oh, that's amazing. And then I show you how I did it. You'd be like, oh, that's not that interesting. But if I showed you the 5 hours I took at my daycare individually introducing your dog to dogs, now he's in a completely different environment, and I explain what I'm getting from the dog that teaches me what to do, that's interesting, if that's what you're into. So a lot of people, there's a couple pieces in there. One is, I'm not for or against. I'm not on people's teams. I'm not a thief of information, so I just like to always give credit. So, one of the things Caesar, he was one of the first people I heard say is, we get the dog we need, not the dog we want. So there's a lot of people out there that have dogs that aren't challenging them to be different. And when you do, so once your dog lunges, now everybody feels like they have to do something instead of thinking, what do I have to be for my dog to get them to do? So one of the things that's powerful for me is I'll tell people to go to the dog park. And that's like the antichrist for most dog trainers. And I could care less, because I think most of the people that are doing it aren't doing it right. That's why they're not having success. But they continue to bash that. The tool, the dog park for me is a tool. It's just like the leash is a tool, just like staying calm is a tool, just like getting emotional is a tool. So when I look at the problems, most of what I'm asking people to do is stare directly into your fear, because that's why your dog has that problem, is because when he has the problem or she has the problem, she's tapping into something that you can't be, and that's really where you need to change. So for me, I have a friend that just adopted a super cute little white dog, and she says, what do you recommend? And I said, get a thick skin. And she said, what do you mean? I said, you're going to have people constantly wanting to pet your dog and touch your dog, and you're going to have to be okay saying it's not, no. Because is it fair for your dog to be the social butterfly all the time? Maybe. But maybe your dog's not into that. So we don't really know until we start to socialize and get into the dog. I mean, we'll see things as puppies and stuff, but, for her, that's not comfortable, because that's not who she is. She's super bubbly. She's got purple hair. She's always, she would meet you right away, and then she'd be starting to, work on your website with you. She is just that kind of person. So it's going to be interesting for her when somebody reaches out her dog. She knows she's not comfortable, and she can't, as my friend Susan Hyatt says, make a scene. Hey, don't touch him. He doesn't want that right now. Because I just had this happen to another friend of mine whose dog bit the cable guy, because the dog was laying down. They had an okay relationship. He walked over into occupied territory, did something submissive, tried to pet the dog, which then confuses the dog. You do something dominant, you come into my territory, then you do something submissive, well, then I earn the right to discipline you because I don't want you here right now. Boom, dog bites him on the hand. Could have all been saved if my friend wanted to make a scene and say, hey, excuse me, please don't pet my dog right now. But again, it's about being. It's not about him doing a sit or doing a down, or it's about me feeling like I can control my environment and I can be who my dog needs. So for me, one of the dogs that I got had bit a lot of people, and I never felt super comfortable. And the reason why is because I was embarrassed to use a muzzle. And this was when I was early in my dog training. And then I started to think, one of my mentors said to me, I never think bad. He's like, whenever I see dogs, I never think bad dog. I think safe owner. That's what a muzzle's for, a safe owner. It means I'm trying.
Yep.
It means that we have to be on the team so I don't make you feel insecure. I have a whole video on this on my YouTube channel. I'm very passionate about muzzles because it's a lot of what I believe, because, again, it's the same thing. If I say to you, Cameron, your dog is human aggressive, so we need to get him around humans. We don't need to put him on a place bed and keep him away from humans. We need to deal with the stress when he's there. Well, that makes you fearful. So then what do you want to do, which is biological, not do it. So then while you continue to get your problem, then you walk your dog at midnight, then you take your dog out and play Frisbee at 2 a.m. I mean, the cycle just happens. I've seen it 1,000 times. Then you get the owners that come to you and say, yeah, just take him up, put the muzzle on, show me, I know who my dog is. You listen to me, you know who I am. You give me the experiment. It happens. We get the results. We talk about what the results came by. We know how to do the next step. Right? Okay, perfect. This is what he did, and this is how he responded. Great. Then let's take her over here and do this now because this is the next step she needs. So, for me, everything that I do is free, like everything. I have Instagram. I put up sometimes 100 Instagram stories a day about all of these exact situations. And what I get from most people is they realize they were doing too much because if you're doing so much, you really don't know. So I came from a strong, in the beginning, I was a pack walker. Then when I moved to California, I went to work at a dog training school, and all we did was, one of the best in the world, precision obedience, bite work, all these kinds of things. And one of the things we used to talk about is if you change too many components and your dog has a problem, we don't know what the problem was. So if I ask your dog to bite somebody and they're new, in a new suit, in an environment they've never been in, and the dog doesn't do it, then what's the problem? I don't know. Yeah. So if I can control one of those, new person, same suit, same location, then we go, oh, it's the person. So that's what we have to work on. So, so for me, it's really, really powerful. Again, the self-awareness part is understanding, are you being what your dog needs before you do anything? Because what you probably want to do is just covering up more of why your problem is there. So, I don't want to get off too much on a tangent. Tell me to circle back a little bit. I'm a very
No, this is good and leading directly into where I think will be a lot of value for sure, especially if you can kind of give a little bit of a peek and behind the curtain of your own examples of that, Yeah.
Perfect. So for most people, so I'm not the Antichrist, but I believe that dog training is part of the problem. We're asking dogs to do things that they don't emotionally connect to. So your dog is laying down or sitting right now for his own reason. When we ask him to do it, most of the time it's covering up something that we're feeling emotionally. And the dog can't connect to that because they're not living the same reality. You have a predator. You have a dog that has learned skills. So when you interfere with nature that way, you better be really clear that the dog understands. So, again, if you watch a YouTube video and the dog trainer says, or the dog, anybody's a dog trainer. And I read an article about how to take your dog to the dog park the other day from a dog blogger. So she or he went online, researched probably a bunch of articles from you and me, put all this together, and then never has even done it. Right?
Wow.
How much value are you providing? You're actually, for me, I'm a vigilante in the way of I love to go after those people because you're making my job harder, right? You're making me the fourth phone call, which is depressing because so many people couldn't fix this problem where they spent 10 hours on YouTube trying to teach their dog sit. So if your dog lunges and you ask him to sit, you have a predator that's thinking dominance and you're asking him to do something submissive physically. How do they connect to that? Because he or she sits when they want to rest. Why? I've never seen a predator sit down before they chase something. It doesn't happen. They don't lay down in a stay like we talk about. They'll lay down to stalk, the predatory sequence. There's parts of that. I understand that. But if what we're usually trying to do is cover up something to make us feel more bold. Sit. Right? Now we can put pressure on you to behave. You sit. Even though I'm scared, I have no idea and I don't feel in control. But if you sit, it gives me the perceived feeling of control. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then for me, I just see years and years of years, people keep trying it, keep doing it. And it usually just gets more physical and not physical like rough, just more physical challenge, more walking, more vests, more backpacks, and all this junk, when really pack leaders of dogs control emotionally, not physically. As soon as you open up a physical challenge to your dog, you've already lost, because dogs will out-challenge you physically all day long. I mean, if you have a basset hound, he walks an hour or she walks an hour, I get it. But, you know, if you have a strong behavior problem and you're trying to control a dog physically and not understand what we talked about in the beginning, what they're feeling emotionally, then no matter what you do, you're not going to help. And I've seen most of the time it makes the problem worse, because now the dog realizes you can't help me. Right? I sit when I'm at home.
Yeah, I don't trust you. I don't believe you.
I have no idea what, you know, you're telling me. So now it becomes what? Self-preservation. I'm stuck on this leash. I don't know what to do. You're not understanding that I don't want to be here. So then I lunge. Then the dog has a forward action. It triggers fear in us. The behavior is learned by the dog, how to control the situation, and you just keep going. And you know, so many people are focusing on the do, when really they don't even understand, number one, their dog, you know, who their dog really is from nature, but then also what the reality that they're creating for the dog is, how it's affecting them. And I'm just such a big believer on, like, before you do anything, like, we could be making the problem worse. So let's just slow down, like you said in the beginning. Let's slow down and ask the most powerful question that one of my friends who is always into self-growth, she always says this to me. Most humans have a problem, try to fix it, and never ask themselves why I have this problem in the first place. If you understand why you have the problem in the first place, you understand why you have it in the first place, the moves, that's what I said, it's not that hard, right? You know, there's a million ways to get a dog to walk behind you. It's not that hard. But if you can understand why a dog should walk behind you, what it means when a dog walks next to you, what it means when the dog walks in front of you, not to you, but to them, then you're able to actually do things. And then it becomes not a big deal, because you're like, oh, just, you know, do these couple little things, and you're like, oh, okay. And really, again, it's about focusing on the B. One of my mentors always says, I focus on the pattern in the dog first and then change the human second. So, you know, I tell you, don't touch your dog, because you don't know if you're going to share dominance or this. I ask you to do this. Once your dog starts to pattern, and I'm talking to you every day, and the environment is changing, now we can really dig into what's going to make this, like, really last, is understanding how and why you created this problem in the first place. And if you can come to grips with that, then you realize all the symptoms go away and your life completely changes, like you said, because that's going into other places. You know, there's so many times when you won't make a scene for your dog that you also won't make a scene when somebody wrongs you in real life, because it's who you feel, controlled by the environment and different things. Well, that was a long
no, you're doing fantastic, and it's so exciting to be, you know, on the other end of this, you know, project and creation, because, you know, everything that you're leading into is exactly what we've intended to create this event around. And it's that aspect of the conversation that is generally harder for our dog owners to come to terms with, harder for them to hear and own and, you know, lean into. But it's the thing that I think, you know, rewards and reinforces our work above all else, because at least for me, I see people start to get this, and not only do they improve their life with a dog that they now can accept for who it is and appreciate for what, you know, they are capable of and what they do bring, and really step up and be what that dog needs, but all of these other areas of their life start to crack open in terms of how they improve their marriage, their parenting, their, you know, experience of business and work life, and, you know, many other aspects just, you know, have the potential to have a ripple effect of positive change. And I think the root of that is this leadership concept. And where, you know, people really need to, as you articulated, understand their relationship with their dog as it relates to being in the lead and leading, you know, and giving information to that animal and looking at that being as an animal first and not, you know, another human being. But then also, you know, seeing the leadership.
Quick?
Please go for it.
The leader part for me though, and this is where I think a lot of people get tripped up when they hear that word. For me, that means be a good follower. So when people see leader, I think a lot of times they think I now have to dominate and have this like non-loving, completely like, dictatorship with my dog. Really, the best leaders are the ones that understand every single one of their followers and what they need and give it to them. Because it's really about getting the goal done. It's really about us all moving this ball forward, not me telling you what to do. It's me understanding what you need from me to get what I need from you. Don't bite people. Okay, don't be fearful, human. Perfect. We deal? Good. Okay, good. And then then it goes on. I mean, really. And then the other thing this is like how much reality some people need. You will absolutely, while you're searching and you're doing all these things, you will absolutely change when you love your dog enough. And that's one of the things another one of the things my mentor said to me, that I will say that to clients and it punches them in the stomach because it's real. Because if you've seen me on video doing all the things that you haven't been able to do, you know your dog's capable of it. So when you love him enough to change who you are, they will follow instantly that new reality. Yep. So it's not, it's deeper than that. And it's such an amazing journey. Like there is no goal. There is no like trained. It's every day learning something or staying consistent at what you've been learning that really makes the lasting change.
Yeah, no, I mean, you totally answered the question that I was heading towards, which was, what does leadership look like to you? And, as I've grown over the years, to me, one of my favorite little, mantras or sayings about it is that leadership should be viewed as stewardship. And it's within that context that, I sort of have framed what you articulated, that it's really about creating a platform for other people to succeed and have what they want. And in turn, they become part of something that motivates and inspires and, cultivates an ethic that, you can't force on somebody or on something. And that beautiful sort of reciprocity that you described is what comes out of that when you're willing to step forward and be vulnerable as a quote unquote leader, to really be authentic and see yourself the way other people do and things like that. So, yeah, any other thoughts on that? In fact, compassion, I love that. Yeah, any other thoughts that you want to share on that, defining that leadership as it stands for you would be of value, I think, to people as well.
I always look at my dogs as I don't judge what they do. It's just an action. So even with people, if somebody wrongs me, I look at what they did, not who they are. So if you take money from me, I don't care who you are. I don't like that. So it doesn't matter who you are, my grandma, some person on the street. I don't like that thing. So when I look at my dogs, I look at the actions as my responsibility to control the environment. So as, it's recycled a lot around. Our dogs need protection and direction, but we have to be compassionate in what that means to them. So for me, it might be, so one of the biggest learning experiences that's changed my marriage is the two Shih Tzus we've had over the last few years. They've both been sensitive dogs in the fact that they're looking to observe first and then get involved second, which is very different than me. I'm a very jump in and let's get going, let's make this thing better. She's much more of a sit, observe, check it out. And ironically, it's a characteristic in a lot of my friends that I surround myself with that I really like, and I wish I was more like that. But I never put the connection together because every time she would do that, I would rush. Come on. Right? Because it was on my timetable. But I wasn't compassionate to what she needed. And it's changed my marriage because one of the things that's very similar is my wife. My wife is a creative who sometimes needs to wrap her brain around something. She's extremely intelligent and just needs a second. That's it. It's not because she's scared or she's not, but I'm just like, go, which is, kind of where, one of the Mark Zuckerberg quotes is move fast and break shit. I mean, that's kind of my go, right? And then when it comes up and you fix it, you go, where she's a little slower. So for me, really having that ultimate compassion towards your animal, it doesn't matter if you think that person isn't scary. If your dog is having an emotional reaction to that situation, it doesn't helping them by not understanding what they're going through. I mean, you have to understand, most of these dogs have fear problems. Most of it's socialization problems. What they learn to do with it is what they live in. You know, fear can go forward. You know, I mean, there's different things that we can confuse our dogs to go. So fear isn't always running backwards, which is interesting because that's how most of us think fear. But, you know, when we see, you know, you'll hear people quote fear, aggression, and these different things. Well, then why is the dog going forward if it's truly fearful? So then you look at the why. What is it in the dog's life? And that's a lot of questions from me. You know, where does your dog walk? Why do they walk like that? Do you have dogs that have fences? Do you see, you know, what, all of those things, then I can understand what the dog is going through. And, you know, there's a famous author, Simon Sinek. He has a great TED Talk called Start With Why. I think it's probably the most viewed TED Talk ever. And he has this thing, he says, bosses say go, leaders say let's go. And that's always what I want my dog to know is I'm bringing my 50%. You better bring your 50% to the relationship. So I'm going to challenge myself by providing an environment that you can thrive, but you better bring your 50% too. And it's, you know, understanding that part of it, that it's teamwork, that they change when we change. You know, you can't say, send your dog to a 3-week boarding train, bring him back, and then be the same, and then expect the dog to remember the reality from 3 weeks ago that he's not living in. That's not the way dogs work. That's the way humans can explain it to themselves, but it's for me, I mean, again, there's people that have results, and that's awesome. Like, that's great. But from my 11 years of hearing a lot of this stuff, I find a lot of people, when the dog understands that the reality is the same, then they go back to what they used to do. Little things might change, but they're like, oh, okay, because they're reactionary to the reality. That's the number one thing. They can't change, and then you follow along.
Hugely important piece of it. We look at that, you know, training relationship with our clients as a long-term, you know, dynamic shift and lifestyle, you know, new practices and lifestyle coaching, as it, you know, if you will, in terms of creating those lasting changes and long-term success. So I'm glad you hit on that. I have a question for you that I think is really, you know, pertinent to what you're specifically doing with your business and where you have a really particular skill, and that is, are all dogs candidates for a daycare environment and socialization? Is it always valuable to a dog to experience socialization as, you know, spending time in a pack of dogs, or are there circumstances where this will be limited or not necessarily valuable? Because I think this is one of the most confusing areas for dog owners, is the, you know, impression that their dog needs to socialize, but not understanding what is socialization, and then also what socialization can do for their dog based on, you know, overhauling or rehabilitating, as it were, behavioral issues they're having, or from a prevention standpoint. So can I get you to sort of speak to that point, and how do you determine whether or not there's going to be value in the socialization work that you do in the daycare environment for dogs, and if there are limitations to what that has to offer that people can be aware of?
So my daycare is, with my partner Teresa here in LA, is like no other daycare that I know of except for who I learned from. And that's the part of, we take only bad dogs. So, like, I thrive on dogs getting kicked out of other daycares, because I know that I'm always going to educate. I'm going to always educate myself more to make that valuable to the client and the dog. So, you know, one of the top things that dogs get kicked out of in daycare for here in LA is humping. Oh, he humped that dog, or whatever it is. And again, to me, all of this is just communication, and it ultimately comes down to, you know, your initial question of, you know, should the dog do this and should the dog do that? And I always ask the client, why do you feel that way? Oh, because my cousin's brother-in-law's sister's friend takes her dog to daycare and he's doing great. Okay, well, my sister lives in New York and she's an actress. I live in LA and I work in the dog and tech field. So should my parents have raised us the same? We're 3,200 miles apart, living completely different lives, but we're the same family. I mean, it's just fascinating how much we don't realize how it's a tool, right? Like, living in New York for her is a tool to get what she wants, which is to create art. So is socialization important? Yeah. But I don't know what your dog needs until I know why they're doing what they're doing. So I find most of the time it's fear, frustration that dogs are dealing with, and that's why they act out. When they come to my place and Teresa and I put the dogs through the paces, number one, with nothing that they understand. There's no people there that they can feel bold around. It's a completely overwhelming environment because it's all new. So for the first time, most of the time, for the first time in that dog's life, they're thinking, what the hell is going on right now? And when you're thinking that, you can't be bold because you're feeling a little bit, I have to self-preservation. What's going on here? Why are those dogs over there? Who are you? What's your intention? Then I get to actually see who your dog is. If I take your dog out of the environment and I see a completely different dog in minutes sometimes, and that's not because I'm great. It's not because I'm some guru. It's because that's how powerful and how strong dogs believe the reality they're given. Change happens instantly. So then what do I have this dog there for all day? I don't need the dog there all day. I understand the dog. Okay, it's just a human problem because your dog is totally cool with dogs. Your dog doesn't want to bite people, is walking behind me on the leash, is doing all these things. But that's because ultimately what it comes down to is knowledge. It doesn't matter what you want to do. It doesn't matter. It's knowledge. Is the dog park bad? Sometimes. Is it good? Yes. Is it bad? Yes. Is it good? I mean, I could go back and forth on both sides constantly. But if you understand what you're trying to accomplish there, then you can use it for what you need. It doesn't mean that your dog needs to go to the daycare 5 times a week. It doesn't mean that your dog needs to go 1 time a week. You know, it really depends on where you're at. So before I got into dogs, I was a tennis coach at a very high level. I played tennis my whole life, opened a club in New Jersey. You know, we had kids that went to Princeton. I mean, we like kids that like went on to play in like the satellite. I mean, we're talking like high level tennis. And it taught me so much about understanding how to teach, how to meet somebody where they're at and not impose what I want, but making what they already have better. So if your dog does something already, but let's say before I get onto that tangent, we could talk about downstay and some of that kind of thing. But, you know, I look at what is the problem. So I find most of the time the problem, like I said, is fear and frustration. So if I look at what causes fear and frustration in a dog's life and remove those and then put them back in the same environment and get a different result, then I'm on to something. And that's what we do. So, like, you know, we have kind of like a little protocol that we go through. Like, you know, I could spend an hour just talking about how we use the muzzle, you know, and why we use the muzzle.
I know, it's so hard to limit when we love, the thing that we do.
Yeah. So for me, it's really about understanding, like, you know, is daycare the best solution for your dog if it's the daycare that your dog needs. So if your dog is this type of personality, then they might thrive at this daycare here. But if your dog is a different type of personality, then your dog is not going to thrive. And ultimately for me, it's about the environment. So there's daycares here that pack in 135 dogs and, you know, and there's all the, you know, that's great. We max out probably 25 dogs. We're probably double the price of everybody else. And we do a lot more work. But what I do is I really make changes in people's life. It's easy to take a 2-year-old golden retriever that's never had problems and throw them in a group of 135 dogs. That's fine. But, you know, that one, you know, that puppy does something because he's like, oh, you know, I'm a teenager and, you know, well, let's do this, and does it to the wrong dog who has hip dysplasia, and then that dog does what he's supposed to do, or she, and go, get off me, man. Totally normal. Now that dog is getting kicked out of daycare. So that to me would be an improper match. I have dogs that are like, you know, education 104, and I have a dog that's 101. They shouldn't be together unless that's for a reason, because that dog is getting a message he might not need yet. And I'm taking the dog that's at a 104 and saying, I'm going to challenge you by bringing in these dogs that you're going to need to teach. And sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. So ultimately, I look at every single thing as a tool, and I need to get it into a place that fits into socialization. So I would use daycare just as much as I would use a leash. I would use a bike just as much as I would use a muzzle. I mean, it just depends on what that dog needs to get them to go forward. So give you an example, common problems, a dog lunges on the leash. I find what you're doing there is the dog at some time had a curiosity, got frustrated because of this man-made device that's around their neck that they have no understanding of because it's not natural for them. They have a reaction, and it gets worse and worse and worse because they get more frustrated and more frustrated. They're, I call it the Romeo and Juliet syndrome. She's on the other side of the fence, and you're like, how do I get over there? And every single day, I can't get over there. It's going to get worse. I'm going to try to climb the fence. I'm going to try to break out. I'm going to try to do things that just step up my game. And when I bring a dog in and I take leashes off and put them around the right dogs at the right time, causing the right amount of stress and the right amount of release of stress, then all of a sudden this new dog comes out because it makes sense to them. They're like, wait, hold on a second. I'm allowed to move now? Wait, I'm not trapped? Wait, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And then there's no reaction. So by removing the problem, the leash, not being clear on how I'm supposed to move through territory on a leash with my owner walking, I have stress. When I'm free, and that doesn't mean like go home and take all your dogs off leashes. That's not what I'm saying, but it's saying like understanding when they have a control in the situation, when they're actually mentally allowed to make choices, you'll see a lot of symptoms disappear because they don't need that coping skill at that moment. When you replace meditation for sugar, then you don't need sugar. You have a new skill. So that's what we're trying to do with these dogs is I don't like when you do that, but I can't take something away because there's nothing there. So I have to put something in the place of that, this healthier skill. So do I feel like daycare is for every dog? No. Do I think that every owner wants their dog to go to daycare and dog parks and dog beaches? Nope. But I think a lot of people are doing things that cause antisocial dogs who would benefit or would take their dog to the bank, but the dog barks in the car. But then they'll do something that exacerbates that problem, not realizing that that's what's exacerbating the problem. And going to daycare or doing any of this is not going to help because your problem is windows, your problem is frustration, your problem is fear of humans and not understanding how can I move. One of my horse friends, she's an amazing trainer, and she talks about physical confinement and mental confinement. And most of our dogs struggle from physical confinement, but that doesn't mean that their brain isn't stopping their work. So even though your dog is laying down and staying, he could absolutely still want to bite somebody. So the physicalness and understanding. So for me, it's really about then understanding the socialization pattern. Understanding is it that you get surprised? We have a dog at daycare that's super friendly, super good, all that stuff. When we don't have new people come in, but every once in a while my partner's kids will come over or whatever. When something changes in the environment, she's really sensitive. And that's what the owner's problem is not enough socialization, so she's hyper-focused in her environment. So by coming to us, she gets to have all these experiences, but doesn't have to feel like she's responsible to do something, like lay down or stay behind her or walk or not. She hears something happen, and she can jog 3 feet, circle around, and go, what the heck was that? And then I don't get the barking because she was able to do what nature would have told her in the beginning, which was do this to release your stress, not what you accidentally learned from trying to live in a human world. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really want people to extrapolate here, as well from everything that you're sharing is process, that you really have a healthy process that's in place around when and how you use this mechanism of socialization and the way in which you go about doing it that is the key. It's not that it's a bad tool or a good tool across the board. It's not that it's for everyone or not for anyone. It's about having a healthy process and being willing to find the right outlet to offer that piece of the puzzle in an overhaul process or in an endeavor, to balance things out for your dog or for your relationship. And I think I really want people to hear that and understand that from all of your life experience, this keeps coming up, right? As an entrepreneur, as a trainer, as a coach, as a, teacher in your business now, as a person who is conscientious and attuned to dog behavior, there's this healthy process that has to be a part of everything that says, let's get to the root. Let's go after the difficulty. Let's not avoid the thing that's uncomfortable. Let's all of these little components that I would love to see more and more dog owners really recognize is sort of at the root of where they're succeeding or struggling unnecessarily, right? Because, there's just no shortcuts in this dynamic to kind of going, all right, well, this is the dog I have in front of me, and these are the things it needs, and I'm going to need to make adjustments and, prioritize and strategize and, figure out how to work the things into your own, personal development and self-awareness process to, getting access to the things that are going to benefit your specific dog and so on and so forth. So I appreciate that I can see you kind of sharing that from a broad spectrum and want to make sure that people really capture that and see for themselves how they can take that and borrow from, your mental process and your approach to the problem solving aspect of dog training and changing behavior, that it's about really getting in there and looking at what is the big picture work here that needs to happen? Are we overcomplicating things? Are we overly simplifying things? And then there's oftentimes a little bit of everything. So I just really wanted to draw attention to that and make sure that people take that away from the conversation, because I think it's really a game changer for a lot of people that this is a process issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I give this analogy all the time to clients. My wife is a writer, right? So she's a screenwriter. She has a TV show. She writes. Does it matter if she has a Mac or a PC? Nope. Does it matter if she writes on her iPhone or iPad? Nope. It's a tool. It's a tool to help her accomplish. She doesn't care if she's writing on Microsoft Word or Final Draft or Grammarly or numbers or pages or slides. Doesn't matter. She understands how to build a story. She understands what is character development, what is plot. When you understand that, the tools become irrelevant. The tools actually get in the way because you're like, I just took a master class from Annie Leibovitz, the photographer, and she said, I wish I could just get rid of the camera because it just gets in my way, the technology. I see in my mind what it is. And when you have that, you start to realize how not important the tools are. But for me, especially the younger people, that's what we focus on because it's so easy. And I mean, and it's overwhelming, that form of content. I mean, for every one of my Facebook posts where I make a joke about a certain tool or something, there's 100 people that day who are telling people the complete opposite. And that's great. That's what this is all about. But, for me, it's just common sense. I mean, if I went out, like she's writing on 2 different laptops right now, a MacBook Air and a MacBook Pro. Is one better than the other? One's newer. But the story's still, it's the same,
right?
It's the same process.
Yeah.
It's how she does the research. It's all the same. And then from there, you'll find the changes. Every day when a new dog comes in, it's the same process. But in business, like you said, in entrepreneurship, startups, you realize how to pivot quick. Whoa, wasn't expecting that. But because I've done it before, I know where to go next. And, so many people are taking this seminar or this thing. They go home. They do it for like a week, usually don't even practice it. Then they go on to the next thing. And then it's like, well, wait, you didn't even work through. You're going to find 47 problems with that person's strategy. And not that they're bad, but I'm just saying, like, do this and then this happens. That doesn't happen all the time. So you're going to get that 10th dog that does this, even in the same philosophy or strategy. Now what do? Well, they don't even get to the 10th one because they're taking the next seminar next week. Everybody's just, addicted to education. Versus saying like, okay, really, it's not, I don't really care. I always joke around and say I could walk my dogs on a dental floss. It's a law. I want my dogs to be listening to me and want to be around me. because pack leaders, I always, oh my God, he's such a genius. Pack leaders make dogs feel a certain way at a certain time for a certain reason. And that's what I want my dogs to be. I want them to want to be around me because I make them feel a certain way. I make them feel that way at certain times and for a certain reason because they understand we only live in hierarchy as dogs. So if you're in control, making me feel a certain way, and I believe it, then I'm not going to do what the things that I might have thought I would have done. And when I bring those dogs in, that's what we do. We just change the reality that they have. And I mean, I've had, maybe two dogs this whole year that I was like, this is good. This is something I haven't just seen the last, the last 6 months of the same thing over and over and over. This is actually a little different. And, there were fun little projects. One was a foster dog. And then the other one was just a dog that had been around, to a lot of different trainers. And, it was really fascinating. This is a really funny story. The dog was in our daycare constantly, not on leash, nothing being asked, and she would not get off the Kuranda bed. So that's her coping skill, right? That's all she knew was when I feel that. So I joked around with the owner. I said, how often do you walk with the Kuranda bed? And she's like, what do you mean? I go, well, that's the only thing your dog knows is a coping skill. So, I mean, how does it transfer into real life when she wants to bite a person? Right? How does that, I don't, so.
Yeah, it has its limitations for sure. And that's hard for a lot of owners, give me the things that do, like you said, the things to do that will, almost I think a lot of people have to go through almost a first iteration of what feels like leaning in to solving the issue. And it's really just, they'll hold on to that next thing, right? That's the do that will feel like it'll solve the problem. And then they run into a whole other layer of struggle at some point that kind of pushes on them to dig deeper and really be willing to look at the bigger picture stuff going on. So I know we could talk for hours on this stuff, and I don't want us to run into an issue of running out of time on our call, but I'm thrilled to have your insights and share and to be able to get into some of this stuff with you today. And I know that it will be a tremendous value to the audience. I've been personally enjoying following along with everything that you're doing online, and you have a tremendous humor and wit and just authenticity when you're sharing on social media in particular, and kind of giving people a peek behind the curtain and insights into what goes on day to day. And I want to strongly encourage people to make sure they go and follow through on the links that we've provided and become a part of your community at the Dog Side and the Soul Nut Foundation. And with our last few minutes, though, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about this really cool offer that you have for the community today, and how they can further engage with you and stay on top of what's going on, in your work life. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll have you kind of share really briefly about this tutorial and gift that you have for exclusively our audience.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that because I'm the very opposite of my wife. I'm more auditory. I'm more visual. I don't, I have a newsletter, but sitting down and writing is like, to me, it's like scary. That's my scary. So when you had mentioned this, the offering, and we had been talking about that, and I actually had dinner with my friend the other night, and he's like, oh, we're thinking about getting a dog. And it clicked in my brain right away. You are the exact person I need to talk to. So I started asking him a lot of questions, and then that's what this turned into. It is him telling me everything he thought about little dogs and big dogs and breeds and the things that he's brought with him from the past, different fears and excitement. And I just tried to boil it down into real common sense of the things, whether you have a dog, whether you're thinking about getting a first dog or a second dog, what are the things that I prioritize with my clients? I've never actually written it down. It's more like usually just a conversation. So it was really fun for me to sit down and kind of hammer this out. So a lot of that is,
good.
We talked about it before. How to understand why you're getting a dog. Understanding what are my expectations with this dog. A lot of my clients that I hear in LA are producers and different things, and their offices are dog friendly. And so be honest. I mean, are you going to adopt a dog and you're going to take it to the office the first day and there's 3 other dogs there? So don't rescue the dog that might have dog issues because it has a cute spot on its nose, right? So we just, we have to look at the whole big picture because this is a relationship. I'm making choices for this dog. Unfortunately, they don't have that ability to say, hold on a second. You're not going to continue to walk even though you said you were going to. Because I talked to your sister, and she said you started to jog 2 years ago and then stopped. So please don't pick me, right? So a lot of that. And then also,
I love this too because even for people who aren't getting a dog, this is valuable for them for hindsight. Like to go back and look at where did they start with their relationship with a dog, that they may or may not be struggling with, and to give them some insight into, their process back at that intersection in their life. I actually think this is tremendously valuable for the folks who, aren't necessarily looking at it coming up ahead, but actually being able to reflect back as well. And
so that was kind of the first half, and then I'm so passionate about my journey. So I just did, maybe a couple paragraphs just about the things, maybe 5 or 6 things, 4 or 5 things I think it was, that are just really powerful for me, that are just blanket statements, that I could make about dogs. And because there's not a ton, but there's definitely things that I believe strongly in. Every single owner, regardless of whether your dog has a problem or not, could just help a little bit understand more what their dog is going through. Living a dog life, thinking like a dog, and then having to understand the human part of the life and make sense of it with only the skills they have. So I just, it's a little bit of both. So, if you already have a dog, the bottom will be a great little, starter. I link some articles in there for a little bit more in depth. So, number 1, I wrote something that's very important, but I had written a full article that maybe somebody wants to read or doesn't. You can totally link out to each one of those, some videos and things that I could, that just go a little bit deeper on those. So thank you for putting the responsibility on me to create that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love how the universe does that sometimes. Often. It's like, there's a little intention that gets thrown out there and you start to open up the possibility of something, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're having this conversation and the inspiration hits. And it's like, oh, well, I could talk about that for days. Heck yeah, I'll put it down and capture it for people to benefit from. So, yeah, and sometimes we get, inundated, at least as in leadership or, being the CEOs of our companies, thinking about how to create all of these different projects all the time. And we forget easily some of the very simple components of what really, helps our audiences the most. And I think things like this, we forget just how simple it can be, but there's going to be a lot of people who really benefit from this article and from following you going forward. So everybody needs to get on over there and subscribe, be a part of the Dog Side community and newsletter, and Instagram is the Dog Side as well, right? But 1 S, if I remember correctly, not Dog Side.
I have both, but I had grown one account so much, and then I didn't want to change anything, so I'm going to reach out to Instagram eventually. But yeah, so it is just 1 S.
Gotcha.
But if you see the other one, that is me too. But all my content goes to the Dog Side. Yeah, that's where all my Instagram stories are and everything. And then I included a couple other things as the free gifts. Or not everybody is a trainer and creates marketing material, but I have a members only site of part of my website. I'm a photographer too. It's, I love making content and things. So I gave everybody free access to that. So there's over 100 high quality images that people can use totally for free. Facebook posts, whatever pictures in your newsletter, whatever you need. If you just want to print one out and put a cute picture of a dog on your wall, my pleasure.
Awesome. Wow. That's a huge, huge give to the training community. Thank you for sharing that, Gary. I appreciate that so much. And I, hopefully people can get more information about what is involved in the programs that you offer in that virtual space through your website, right? If they want to dig deeper into how they can work with you and get a part of that membership, awesome. Yeah, go check it out, guys. Yep. It's doing some really, really cool stuff. And really great person to align yourself with and mentorship to move your business forward and your skills. And once again, I just can't thank you enough for, being a part of this project and giving me the time of day and helping me to move something forward that I've already seen has had a tremendous impact, but I know is only going to continue to grow. So I really do appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for putting it on. It means a lot to me, too.
Yeah, you bet. I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to do some things, together in the future as well in terms of how we move nonprofit work forward and the rescue community. And I really do, I think that having people like yourself with a healthy process and of the mindset that you do and really, focusing on the human education piece of things is encouraging to me as a rescue director as well, because I really do think that's where we need to focus our energy in order to keep dogs in their homes as much as possible and to do rescue, where needed much, much better. So I'm going to continue to harangue you for things like that going forward and look forward to that and where we can be in alignment there.
You should come on my electric skateboard ride. I'm doing 500 miles for my foundation in April. You should come on out. We can talk the whole time.
Oh my God, that sounds like a blast.
Skateboard right
Absolutely.
Next to me.
Sounds good. I don't know, I'll probably brace myself, but that's okay. You're so welcome. I'll close this out here with the suspense of our audience waiting to see what happens with this adventure in the spring. To our listeners, your next interview will be delivered to your email inbox tomorrow. You have access to these interviews for just 7 days once they air, so please keep that in mind and don't fall behind. You don't want to miss out on all this yummy stuff. I look forward to joining you in our next chat. Until then, I just want you to remember that creating the dog of your dreams is directly related to creating the life of your dreams. Committing to a balanced life with your dog is an invitation to dream bigger and better for yourself than you ever thought possible. So we want you to lean in to that leadership calling in front of you, and magical things can definitely happen. All right, everybody, bye for now, and we will talk to you again very soon.